Hello and welcome to the Osceola.com's Seminole Sidelines. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer for the Osceola.com, joined as always by Bob Ferrante, the head editor of the Osceola. A little bit of a different locale today. I am down in South Florida visiting family for the holidays. And man, Bob, I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, would be an uneventful holidays. But unfortunately, maybe about 20 to 25 minutes outside of Tallahassee, you and I get the notification that Mike Norvell has not been fired. No, he has been retained and will be Florida State's head coach for the 2026 football season. Much to public scrutiny, definitely very controversial, but I think a decision that maybe you can come to an understanding once heads have cooled a little bit. We're going to talk about it all today on the Osceola.com Seminole Sidelines. Bob, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Your reaction to Mike Norvell being retained when you saw that message hit your phone screen was what?
Honestly, I expected an announcement Saturday and not Sunday. I think this conclusion is one that was based on, Florida State taking the temperature of its customers, not just those on social media. Obviously, there's a lot of polarizing commentary about Mike Norvell out there on the social media and the message boards. But I think after talking to fans, listening to boosters, projecting what season ticket sales could be looking like into 2026, and really looking at the landscape of this coaching carousel, which is still wild and still spinning with whatever Lane Kiffin does, wherever he lands, college or NFL, it could be a tough scenario for Florida State to make a move. And signing day is coming up on Wednesday. So this isn't the decision that I think a lot of Florida State fans are happy about, but it does take a step back. And I think the emphasis can then turn to what are potential solutions. I know we'll kind of get into that a little bit, but there are some options for Mike Norvell for Florida State as far as not what are easy fixes, but what are some things that you can truly do to make significant improvements, because the on-field product is just not good enough. It hasn't been good enough the last 2 years. I think we can all agree on that. What changes need to be made, we'll see. But I think that's part of the interesting off-season discussion too.
The changes, at least at face value, appear to be squarely centered on Norvell's recruiting operation and the way that Florida State football is able to acquire talent and retain talent. Not obviously, this is not the verbatim statement that was released by Florida State, but essentially the promise is that they are going to give Mike Norvell more resources to help with recruiting, to help with that roster acquisition. And there are going to be more, I hesitate to use the word wholesale changes, because there were wholesale changes last year, but I guess it's more so in the sense that everything is on the table once again, everything except apparently the head coach, which is what I think a lot of drives a lot of the frustration for Florida State fans, is that how many times are you going to be able to say we're going to make sweeping changes until you ultimately come at the conclusion that it's the man driving the bus, and it's not the Gus bus that's driving the entire program that maybe needs to see changes. It's interesting because I think where you immediately look towards when you hear that the administration and Mike Norvell are going to be taking a look at maybe some of the positions on the staff, you're immediately thinking of guys like Derek Ray. We've talked about the possibility of Florida State bringing in a GM, somebody perhaps with NFL experience, to help Florida State find its way in this era of NIL that apparently it's struggling to recruit in a lot with Mike Norvell. Obviously, some other staffing changes are on the table once again, Bob. You got guys like John Papuchis, and who is not only the linebackers coach but special teams coordinator, who has struggled to produce something to be excited about, not only with the special teams unit but with the linebacker core as well. There's a lot more that's on the table. What I find interesting and also concerning at the same time is that the administration is using all of these resources and trying to gather all these resources to help Mike in an area in which he has proven to be subpar in, even in the best of circumstances. This was a team that was 13-0 a couple of seasons and still struggled to recruit at the high school level and hit on those evaluations. That is where my head goes. I struggle to find the light and the positivity in giving Mike more NIL and more resources to improve something that he has shown continuously to be subpar at over the course of his tenure. That is something that is very concerning to me as somebody that has been close to the recruiting side of things over the past year and a half or so. Is that something that concerns you as well, Bob?
Yeah, this is a tough one. This is the, I think, the crux of the argument. There's really not much of a table to stand on to defend Mike Norvell as far as the on-field product. The recruiting, and I know you're more the recruiting guy than me, but there are enough contributions from the 2024 class and the 2025 class on the field to say things are getting better at certain position groups. Not painting with a broad brush here, right? The quarterback position, you got to get better at player development. For example, linebacker still a real sore spot. We've yet to see enough offensive linemen, really contribute. Those homegrown offensive linemen, you're still leaning on transfers there, leaning on transfers on the defensive line. Although Kevin Wynn has played, although the Desirs have played, need to see more at other position groups. So the questions then become, is Derek Ray out? Is it specifically player identification? Is Derek Ray demoted? Do you bring in an NFL type of GM? I've been writing about this for a couple of months now, that you bring in a Martin Mayhew type, recently retired Florida High graduate, Florida State graduate, a man with NFL experience at multiple stops. He's been to Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl as a player, knows what talent looks like. Do you bring him in to self-evaluate Florida State's front office and give you a thorough review? Mike Norvell talks a lot about self-scouting as far as players and how you coach and how it looks. It's time to self-scout your department of who you identify and bring in from a talent standpoint, because things have to change if this Mike Norvell era is going to work moving forward. I'm trying to stay realistic. I'm trying to be solution-minded as far as, I think paying $58 million is massive, and that was probably at the end of the day the sticking point here, right? If this is a $50 million buyout of Mike Norvell, we're really not having much of a discussion, because that money's probably paid and things will be done with potentially another coach. But because of the amount of money that it is, because the carousel is what it is, the next and last move is to start looking at the front office, the quarterback development, the player development. And really, this is a big if, Nick, but if they can hang on to enough of the 24 guys and enough of the true freshmen out of this 25 class, if those guys have bought in and want to stay. I heard Mandrell Desir again say last week something effective: I love it here, I don't ever want to leave. If you hear enough of that from those types of guys, you start to think, well, there are some building blocks for 2026. Not saying this team's going to compete for a title in 26, just that you see enough of a roadmap toward improvement from what 5 and 6 is now. So that may be too optimistic for a lot of people. I think I'm going to put it in the realistic camp for me, because I'm saying, what are realistic objectives? Again, as far as changes, we're talking a lot about what's a realistic change toward something better. I feel like those are some plausible points.
Well, I think it's very clearly the buyout. It's always been the buyout. It hasn't been anything different than the buyout. I don't think that this administration overwhelmingly feels like Mike Norvell is going to turn things around. But I think from a business decision and in terms of return of investment, what is going to be better for Florida State It doesn't make me happy to say this. In fact, it pisses me off and makes me feel very upset and angry. But the reality is that it is probably better for you to invest in the roster and for you to go through all the basically step through all of the hoops that you need to, or go through all the hoops that you need to in order to not pay this buyout. It's clearly to them a better investment of money to retool the roster, get different assistants, rehaul the recruiting operation. It's clearly a better investment of your money to do that if you're Florida State, or at least this is what they're thinking, rather to pay rumored $100 million in buyouts and staff turnover. That seems like the business decision part of it. And that, to me, is all that it comes down to. And so in that sense, it's like I understand why they've made this decision. When you're looking at the numbers on a spreadsheet, and you just go, ooh, I understand why they've made that decision. It doesn't make me any happier, though. It doesn't make the situation any better. And frankly, I think you're still extending out hope that things get better, when I think it's very clear that you have a football program that's clearly teetering on the edge of extended mediocrity by extending Mike Norvell. Now, that doesn't mean that he absolutely, positively, 100% can't turn things around. But I think it's very important, Bob, where does this money go and how do you use it? If this is money that's being invested in terms of getting a strong transfer portal class for a quick return of investment, is that actually plausible? One, are there going to be players in the portal that are worth that investment? Two, and three, are you going to evaluate them correctly? And essentially, that's what Mike Norvell has been doing for all of the last 6 years. They're giving him more resources to be doing exactly what he's been doing the last 6 years, which is portal fishing. And sometimes you catch a nice big mouth bass, and sometimes you catch a mackerel who doesn't contribute whatsoever. But on the other side of things, if you're using some of that investment to the high school level and you're going to try and secure a better high school class next year, well, that return of investment isn't going to happen until next December, and Mike Norvell might not be the football coach by then. So the plugging of resources into the program, it really is going to matter where that money is spent and how well it is spent, and making sure that this staff absolutely hits on their evaluations. And I think probably the more important thing is making sure that you actually get a general manager or somebody in a front office position that knows what they're doing. Because let's be honest, Derek Ray is not that person. And I think that he has been kept around because Mike is loyal to him. And there are very few other reasons for you to keep him around. That is probably the next head that is going to roll. In terms of assistant staff turnover, I would have to imagine. If not, I would be utterly shocked. I mean, to me, the statement that they put out kind of hints that they're going to make changes in that area anyway, Bob. Wouldn't you agree? So I think that really it's going to matter where they spend their money, because if they're not careful, you're going to invest all of these resources, all of this NIL money that could be going to other programs, mind you. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul again. Link, Lonnie, Luke Laux, Brian Penske, all of these other programs that are really outstanding and doing quite well are now, I'm not saying that they're not going to have, they're taking less money or they're going to have less money, but it kind of goes without saying, if you're pouring more money into football, that money's coming from somewhere, right? So it really is just a matter of where they put their resources in and how they go about it. Would you agree?
Yeah, and let's outline maybe some positives that you could do given some money. For example, you need to pay some money to try and retain Deuce Robinson. Maybe that's $1 million, and maybe that doesn't even do it, right? But that's your difference maker out there on the football field. It might be time to say thank you to Tommy Castellanos for that Alabama win, but go after a different quarterback in the portal. I asked Mike Norvell today, is Tommy cleared to come back through the NCAA or whatever waiver process there is? No clarity there as of yet. So we'll see. Does Florida State roll with Kevin Sperry, but then go after another transfer portal quarterback? Make it an open competition now. It could be Kevin Sperry versus the best transfer you can bring in. You have to rebuild the offensive line. At linebacker, do you go to Zach Arnett and replace John Papuchis there? You have Zach Arnett on staff as an analyst right now. Significant defensive coordinator experience. He's been a linebacker in college, very close and tight with Tony White. Talking about easy type solutions, He's already on staff. That's an easier type of solution beyond the, we're all projecting, I think Derek Ray is moving on, right? I think there are a lot of easier options. It's just a question of how the pieces fit. The money should be there to do a lot of the things that Florida State needs to do to continue to take the next step with this roster, to improve the coaching staff, to improve the front office staff. It's getting expensive. It's getting more expensive with every year to acquire talent. I'll use this as a Jerry Cutts line because he would want us to emphasize it's no longer recruiting. It's a talent acquisition game.
Yes.
And talent acquisition costs money. So we're into that season where the early signing period is coming up on December 3rd. The January 2nd transfer portal window will open. It's talent acquisition season. And I don't want to throw the wrinkle out there of this one too, but we don't truly know what the offensive scheme is going to be in 2026. We don't know if Gus Malzahn, even though he said he's focused on winning the Florida game, going to a bowl game, we don't know if Gus Malzahn wants to come back to Florida State, wants to go to another school, wants to retire. A lot of variables about figuring out what does the offense look like in 2026. But I think that just helps maybe, I think, for a lot of fans to hear what are some potential ideas that Florida State could pursue here.
No, I like the idea of Zach Arnett moving into the linebacker position or coaching that position group. In terms of, you talk about Ray more than likely going. I think Papuchis is more than likely going. It's funny you bring up Gus and Tony because you talked to them yesterday and they had two very different answers to the prospect of leaving and going somewhere else. Tony was more California about it, if you want to put it that way. And Gus was very buttoned up, as Gus is, but it didn't necessarily instill the confidence in you that this is something that's definitely going to be run back. Now, a lot of that is speculation. A lot of that is responding to some, I don't want to say unverified is not the right word because it came from a local news source, but not something that's been widely reported and accepted. And of course, I'm speaking of the report that Gus Malzahn is interviewing for the Arkansas job, or also potentially the University of Alabama Birmingham position. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, Bob. I don't know if I would want Gus Malzahn to return next season, if that would be the case. I'm not entirely sold that Mike and Gus have this outstanding working relationship, if I'm totally honest with you. And if retaining Gus means that you're also more than likely retaining Tommy Castellanos, I think you can miss me with that. Frankly, I think the way out of this is you're either going to have to give Sperry his opportunity to win the starting job and see what you have in Kevin Sperry, or you are going to have to go out and use some of that resources that you were just promised and get the best quarterback that you can, whether that's the kid at Duke, whether that's the kid at North Texas, whose name is escaping me at the moment, who is racking up numbers in the American Conference. Now, whoever that quarterback may be, if you go out and find him, a good quarterback can change everything. And you talk about the retaining of weapons. I think retaining Makai Dancy should be of an utmost importance. Now, obviously, he's probably a little bit safer because he's a two-sport athlete, but what if he decides to focus on track and focus on the Olympic sport? Retaining a LaWayne McCoy, retaining a Javon Boggs. Obviously, Deuce is destined for the NFL this season, so who are you going to bring in to replace somebody like Deuce Robinson? Is that person already on the roster? Is it Elijah Moore? Is Moore not ready yet? It's really, truly a matter of, I think, not to say that they didn't self-scout last year in terms of the sweeping changes that they made to this entire coaching staff, but it clearly was not enough, and they clearly needed to do more and still need to do more. Also, not necessarily entirely out of the woods, I think, is David Johnson, who is the running backs coach, but is also director of recruiting. There's certainly a case that he needs to be more aggressive in terms of the recruiting that he's doing, and that's something that doesn't necessarily always show, especially because Florida State has been pretty wealthy at running back in recent years, but that's something that has been negatively affecting Florida State on the recruiting trail too. So it's you bring up all of these assistant coaches and it just feels like we're doing these wide sweeping changes again. And when do you say enough is enough? I think that's the question that a lot of Florida State fans are saying right now. Do you think that, I mean, you would have to assume, right, if things continue to go poorly and we're getting into October of next year, that would be the final straw, right? I hate to ask you a final straw question because the final straw seems to change every single week, but you would have to assume that this is the chips being pushed into the table, would you not?
Yeah, I think Mike Norvell, there has to be alignment in what the plan looks like between Norvell, Alford, Dr. McCullough, and Peter Collins. If they've agreed to it and they're just not going to tell us publicly yet, in part because you don't want to fire people who are aligned with certain high school prospects who are going to sign on December 3rd, that's why we're not hearing about certain decisions right now. But let's assume certain decisions are made. Yeah, I think Mike Norvell, they're going to open up against Alabama at Tuscaloosa. Win or lose, that's an important game to look good, to look competitive. But then from there, you have to start stacking some wins and earn some cachet back with the fan base, earn some positive momentum. I will say something interesting that I've kicked around, Nick, is the fans showed up this year at Doak. And obviously they saw 5 wins and 2 losses. But with a reduced capacity of Doak, it was still loud. It was still a good crowd. For the most part, the students showed up. It wasn't a full student
With their shirts
allotment
off.
from start to finish, took their shirts off. Yep. It created something of a good atmosphere. I think a really good atmosphere, even in a season that's well below a Florida State standard. So with Florida and Clemson on the schedule, can you expect still pretty good crowds? Is there still enough support for Norvell? Are there still enough players that fans say, I want to show up and watch that guy or that offense or whatever it may be? I agree with you. I think it's a long shot to keep a Deuce Robinson, but I would still drop about $1 million and say, go get your NFL draft grade. And if you're not happy, run it back in 2026 and let's go get a quarterback that makes it fun and helps you develop for the NFL next year. But I'm with you. Mekhi Danzy, the Desirs, Kevin Wynn. There is a good list of guys, I think, from that 24 and 25 class that if they can take that next step and they're getting enough reps or getting enough snaps where you see you can kind of project their development. But I think it has to happen through some new assistant coaches, through some changes to really, I think, give fans that kind of optimism that 2026 is going to be better than 2025.
And something that there is to consider is the fact that right now Florida State is sitting at 29 high school commitments in this recruiting class. I am fully expecting there to be 30 commitments by the end of today, potentially tomorrow. There could be even more commitments coming. You're going to have a 30 to 31 signee high school class that in olden times would have been close to half a roster, Bob. Now, I'm not saying that I'm sure that the high school recruiting class being what it was weighed on the table in terms of the decision to keep Mike Norvell as opposed to letting him go. But to play devil's advocate here, you're reeling in a 30-person high school class, and we have yet to see what those evaluations are going to be like for this new coaching staff. We don't know what Herb Ham's evals are going to look like. Obviously, it's very hard to get on the field as an offensive lineman to begin with, but how are Terrence Knighton's evals going to look like? What about Evan Cooper? There's a lot of question marks there, but you are getting a lot of high school talent as opposed to what was like a 24 member class last year, and that was with a bunch of flips on signing day. Maybe this is a setup to where you can go and be selective in the portal. Now, obviously, there are the things that you absolutely know that you positively know that you need, and that's more offensive linemen and potentially a new quarterback. You need linebackers. You need defensive ends. Maybe with the fact that there is a larger high school class and you're going to have more bodies, there is the potential for you to prioritize and spend big money in the portal. Now, that's not necessarily the most enticing thing, especially considering the track record of recent years. This year, obviously better than last year, but playing devil's advocate, maybe that's kind of what they're hoping for. The fact that they have been able to get such a large high school class, you can focus on getting high quality immediate fixes in the portal. And I'm not saying that's enticing. It's a very tough sell. This entire thing is a tough sell, Bob, if we're being totally honest. But maybe, Bob, that's what they're setting up for here.
And I would argue, like you talked about the offensive line, for example. What if they like Chavez Thompson at center? What if they like Andre Otto at guard? Well, that's at least two spots. Maybe Lucas Simmons isn't ready to take that jump at one of the tackle spots. Maybe you're still back in the portal at tackle, which is where Florida State has lived all along.
Yes.
It's expensive, but Florida State's done it. And maybe you have to do that again, but maybe it's not a full transfer offensive line, for example. I still think you have to bring in a big-time quarterback. There are a lot of pieces. Are you projecting Amari Williams to be one of the big guys at a defensive end, edge role, various role there? I don't know. I think there's a lot of projections with some of these 24 and 25 guys. You bring up a good point about the 26 class. If it's 30 or so guys, probably half of those are going to have to redshirt. You may not get a lot out of them in year one, except for develop on the practice field, and maybe they play in 3 to 4 games. That may be the best case scenario. How many of those guys could be fighting for second team spots, just to give you some good depth if your evaluations are correct, as you wisely pointed out, I think. Well, man, that's a lot of ifs. That's just a lot of ifs. But
you're stacking so many ifs with this move. You really
we
are.
know where you have to spend money, right? I mean, this is easy. You don't need us as analysts to say it. It's quarterback, it's offensive line, it's defensive end, maybe it's a corner too. You get Jabril Rawls back. If Jabril and Shamar are your top corners, that feels pretty good, knowing that Jerry Wilson's moving on from an eligibility standpoint. Maybe you're not out there buying a corner. Maybe you're shifting money again toward a defensive end or toward a linebacker or something else. But again, this goes back to the whole cap discussion. You live with a budget. You have the revenue share that you have, which is extensive. You don't have great NIL funds compared to like an LSU. And again, that Ross Dellinger report over the weekend from Yahoo Sports was mentioning $25 million to LSU was the projected offer to get Lane Kiffin. So that's rev share plus the expanded NIL options through, let's say, local regional businesses in Louisiana that are going to try to put together packages for your players. I don't think Florida State's anywhere near that 25 million neighborhood, and probably doesn't have to, but it has to get better. It has to get to a point where you can, again, acquire the talent to be better than 5-6, maybe 6-6 by Saturday night, but it's got to get better.
To me, Florida State has to be aggressive in the transfer portal. That the more that I think about it, it feels like that has to be the plan, because if you are mediocre in the portal and you're not aggressive there, and let's say that they go 5-7. You and I sipped the Kool-Aid and thought they would be able to beat NC State on Friday. That didn't happen. Now you're going to have to go into Gainesville and beat the Gators, who looked pretty woeful against Tennessee, but they're going to get up for Florida State, and Florida State struggles on the road mightily to begin with. Assuming that they lose that game, you're 5-7. You don't go to a bowl game, which would be incredibly crucial for Florida State. If you are sitting back and you're not aggressive in the portal, and you're coming out of the other side of this thing in spring ball, and your roster has no excitement around it, it is going to be an incredibly hard sell to boosters and fans to be able to support this football program. The way that you install confidence, or not confidence, but even the smallest bit of excitement that Florida State can actually turn around this year, is you actually bring in dudes from the portal. That is the way that you generate the excitement, because I am struggling to find a way, and maybe Jerry Kutz would be able to give me a shine of optimism or a light at the end of the tunnel in terms of how they would be able to sell this. But the loud, I don't even know if I want to call it a vocal minority. A lot of people are really pissed. A lot of people are really pissed and feel like this program is accepting mediocrity. It is going to be very hard for you to sell perceived mediocrity around June, July next season if this roster is improved with dudes from the portal. That's where I feel the initial benchmark is going to be. Now, that's not to say that the solution otherwise would be, okay, we're retaining the dudes that we need to retain. We've already talked about it. We've mentioned the names on the show already. maybe that is the other way to go about it, and finding a scheme. Let's say that Gus moves on, finding players that fit that scheme, spending money on a good offensive coordinator. I feel like there's one way to skin the cat. Do you think that there's more? There's multiple ways to skin the cat. Like I'm really struggling to find another way to be able to sell this football team, which, as Jake is saying in the chat right now, there's no selling this. Michael Alford's job is a salesman, and sometimes he does it really well, and sometimes he does it really poorly. Good luck selling this. Good luck selling this football team. It's going to be a Herculean task.
Yeah, I'm not selling it. I'm just going to lay out a roadmap that I think gets you toward positive momentum, right?
Yes.
Honestly, there's a theory that this decision being announced on Sunday takes the weight off the Seminoles players and allows them to not be playing for Mike Norvell, playing for themselves, playing for a win on Saturday against Florida. I think rivalry wins mean a lot, whether Florida is 10-1 or now 3-8. I think a rivalry win is worth a ton for fans. Florida State hasn't had one since 2 years ago down in the swamp. I think that would give you some positive momentum into the offseason. I don't care what happens in a bowl game, whether Florida State wins or loses. It is opportunity for a lot of younger guys on the practice field to develop in December. I think that's got some value. Fans might disagree because it's just a bowl game, you might say. It's a kind of no-name bowl game in a no-name town. That's fair, but you're right. I do think players need to see a roadmap toward it's fun to play at Florida State. I can be developed for the NFL. It's not necessarily about the facilities anymore. Maybe 5 years ago it was, and now Florida State has those facilities. I still think Florida State has to show that they can develop a lot of guys in one more year of college eligibility, because that's the transfer that you're now speaking to. What can you do for me in addition to the money that you're paying me? I think these are big ifs, and I understand that, but that's the situation that Florida State's got. I think that's the reality of the situation, right, Nick? I mean, it just is.
I don't know if you stopped speaking, Bob, but the internet. Are we back on the air here? You got me? Yes?
Yeah,
no?
you
Are we
froze
back?
up a little bit. You're there.
Okay. Well, I know that Florida State fans are pretty fed up with the FSU administration and Mike Norvell. Seems like my computer is too, or at least my internet. So we've said what we've needed to say. Obviously, this next week is going to be interesting in terms of how Florida State is going to be able to prepare for Florida if they're going to be able to get to a bowl game. I think getting to a bowl game, we said this a couple weeks on the show, is incredibly crucial for this year's Florida State team. I don't care necessarily about the future in that aspect. It is crucially about this year's football team and how you get next year's football team to be better. A bowl game is absolutely crucial. So I guess if you're a Florida State fan, hang in there. I'm sure it really stinks right now. I am with you. The fan, we're unbiased media, but I know that Bob and I are both alumni here. You know, the fandom is buried deep beneath us, and it's a very frustrating situation. So we empathize with you in that. But regardless, you're going to know where to come for your news for Florida State football. That's right here at the Osceola.com insider information, and of course, all of that jazz. There's a promotion going on right now, isn't there, Bob? Some kind for the annual subscription.
Special Black Friday promo that Jerry's put together. It's going to be our throwback pricing. So back to the old newsprint days, under $50 for a full year of the Osceola. You can go to the Osceola.com, hit that upgrade button, and get a full year of the Osceola. So a lot of changes to come. We'll be covering those changes. We'll be trying to analyze them. In addition to shows like these, all of our premium content, our message board, Nick's recruiting coverage. Again, signing day is coming up Wednesday, December 3rd. Not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. It's fast. It's early this year. So we'll have a lot of coverage there, and you'll want to be able to check it all out. So go to the Osceola.com, under $50. I think it's like $49.98 or something like that. But it's one of our best deals of the year.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Bob. Have a great rest of your Monday, and you have a great rest of your week. And if you don't see either myself or Bob, either at the Osceola.com or here on the Osceola YouTube channel, have a very happy Thanksgiving with you and the rest of your family. I'm Nick Carlisle, staff writer for the Osceola. That's Bob Ferrante, head editor. We will see you all very, very soon. Thank you for watching.